Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who call you family? Like no matter what you did, it was never enough? You tried to please, to love, to belong, but somehow you were always the problem. That's not love. That's what it feels like to be raised in a narcissistic family. In narcissistic families, love becomes something you have to earn. It's no longer a natural, safe emotion that flows freely. It turns into a performance, a transaction. You learn early that your worth depends on how well you meet someone else's emotional needs, and not on who you truly are. Love should never hurt, but in a narcissistic environment, it always does. Not because of physical pain, but because of the constant emotional confusion it creates. One moment you're praised, adored, and made to feel special. The next, you're criticized, ignored, or punished for something invisible. This unpredictable pattern conditions you to believe that love is unstable, that it can vanish without warning, and that your value exists only in how much you can please the person holding the power. When a child grows up in that kind of environment, they don't just question love, they question themselves. You start to wonder what's wrong with you. You internalize every rejection, every cruel word, every silent treatment. You begin to believe that love requires suffering, that to be loved, you must sacrifice parts of yourself, your joy, your voice, your authenticity. It's heartbreaking, but it's also the truth for so many who were raised by narcissistic parents. They didn't teach you love. They taught you conditional acceptance. They showed you affection when it served them, when it reflected well on them, when it reinforced their sense of control. But love isn't control. Love isn't manipulation. Love isn't walking on eggshells to avoid someone's rage or withdrawal. Real love is safe. It allows you to be flawed, to make mistakes, to speak your truth without fear of being punished or abandoned. When you've been raised in a narcissistic family, this kind of love feels foreign at first. You may even reject it when it finally comes. You'll think it's too easy or it's too calm. That's because you were trained to equate chaos with connection. You learned that if it doesn't hurt, it's not real. Healing begins when you start to unlearn that belief. It begins when you realize that love that hurts is not love. It's control wrapped in guilt, shame, and dependency. You start setting boundaries, not because you're cold, but because you're finally choosing yourself. You begin to notice that love can exist without fear, that someone can disagree with you and still stay. That affection doesn't have to come with conditions or manipulation. The truth is, love should never make you question your worth. It should never silence you or demand your pain as proof of loyalty. Love should expand you, not shrink you. It should lift you higher, not make you doubt every step. So if you were raised in a family where love meant walking through fire, it's time to step out of the flames. It's time to stop calling suffering love, because real love doesn't burn you, it heals you. Silence in a narcissistic family isn't peaceful. It's punishment. It's a tool used to control, to intimidate, and to remind you that your voice has no power. When you grow up in that kind of environment, you learn quickly that speaking up brings consequences. You learn that honesty can lead to humiliation, and that expressing your feelings might be met with anger, sarcasm, or worse, complete withdrawal. So you adapt. You start reading the air before you speak. You edit yourself in real time, calculating every word for safety. You swallow emotions, not because you want to, but because silence becomes the price of survival. At first, you might mistake this silence for peace. After all, no one is shouting, right? No one's slamming doors. But underneath that calm surface, there's a storm, one that keeps you anxious, alert, and unsure of where you stand. Narcissistic silence isn't quiet, it's suffocating. It's filled with tension and fear, the kind that forces you to question what you did wrong and how to fix it. And the cruel part is, sometimes you didn't do anything at all. The silence is arbitrary, given or taken away as a form of control. As a child, you internalize this dynamic. You begin to believe that silence equals safety. You think, if I stay quiet, if I don't make waves, maybe they'll love me, maybe they won't get angry. But what you don't realize is that every time you choose silence over truth, a piece of your voice disappears. You lose confidence in your right to express pain, joy, or even simple needs. You begin to associate peace with suppression, not with understanding. And this belief doesn't stay behind when you grow up. It follows you into adulthood, into your relationships, your friendships, even your workplace. You might avoid confrontation because your body still remembers what it felt like to be punished for speaking up. You apologize and you haven't done anything wrong. You minimize your needs because deep down, you still believe that your emotions are too much, too loud, too inconvenient. But true peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. from being seen and heard without fear. Real peace allows for disagreement, for discussion, for vulnerability. It's the quiet that follows understanding, not intimidation. Healing from narcissistic silence means finding your voice again, even if it shakes. It means learning that your feelings are valid, your truth matters, and your words have value. It takes courage to break the silence you were trained to keep. It feels unnatural at first, almost rebellious. But every time you speak your truth, no matter how small, you reclaim a part of yourself that was taken. You start to build peace from within, not from the absence of noise, but from the presence of authenticity. Silence taught you fear, but your voice, your brave, trembling, honest voice, will teach you freedom. Gaslighting is one of the most damaging experiences of growing up in a narcissistic family because it doesn't just confuse you, it teaches you to stop trusting yourself. From a young age, you're told that what you feel isn't real, that what you saw didn't happen, that your memory is wrong, or that you're too sensitive. These phrases seem small, but repeated over years, they reshape your entire sense of reality. When the people who are supposed to love and protect you constantly deny your experiences, you start believing that something is wrong with you. You begin to doubt your emotions, your thoughts, and even your instincts. A child who is gaslighted learns that truth is negotiable, that facts can shift depending on who holds the power. You might remember a cruel remark, but when you bring it up, they'll laugh and say, well, you're imagining things. You might cry after being hurt, and they'll accuse you of being dramatic or manipulative. And so, slowly, you stop speaking up. You suppress your reactions. You learn that trusting yourself only leads to pain and conflict. Over time, this creates a deep fracture inside you. One part of you knows what happened, and another part insists that you're overreacting. It's a silent war that never ends. What makes gaslighting so cruel is that it masquerades as love. A narcissistic parent might say, I'm only telling you this for your own good, as they distort your memories or minimize your feelings. They make you believe that their version of reality is the only correct one, that your perspective is flawed, childish, or ungrateful. You grow up walking on the fragile bridge between who you are and who they say you are. And because you crave their approval, you keep crossing back to their side, abandoning yourself each time just to be accepted. The long-term effects are devastating. You enter adulthood unsure of what's real. You second-guess your emotions, your relationships, and your decisions. You overthink simple interactions. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you misunderstood something. And when someone hurts you, your first instinct is to blame yourself, because that's what you were trained to do. But the truth is, you were never crazy. You were conditioned to believe a version of the world that kept someone else comfortable and in control. Healing begins the moment you start trusting your perception again. It starts when you say, I remember what happened, and refuse to let anyone erase it. It begins when you give yourself permission to feel without apology. Rebuilding self-trust is not easy. It means unlearning years of emotional manipulation and learning to stand firmly in your own truth. But every time you validate your own feelings, every time you believe yourself, you reclaim a piece of your reality. And one day you wake up and realize that the voice that once doubted everything has become the voice that protects you. That's when the healing begins, when your truth becomes louder than their lies. In a narcissistic family, you're not raised to be yourself. You're raised to play a role. Every person in that system serves a purpose, often without even realizing it. There's the golden child, who can do no wrong and exists to make the parent look good. There's the scapegoat, who carries the blame for everything that goes wrong. There's the invisible one, quiet and forgotten, who learns to survive by staying small. These roles are not chosen. They are assigned. And they aren't reflections of who you are. They're strategies the narcissist uses to maintain control and protect their fragile ego. As a child, you accept your role because you don't know you have a choice. You learn that love is conditional, that it depends on how well you perform the part you were given. If you're the golden child, you carry the unbearable pressure of perfection. You become the proof that the family is healthy, even when it's falling apart. If you're the scapegoat, you become the target, the one blamed, criticized, and rejected, so the narcissist never has to face their own flaws. And if you're the invisible one, you fade into the background, convinced that being unnoticed is safer than being seen. The tragedy is that none of these roles allow you to be authentic. They teach you that survival means pretending to be good enough, quiet enough, or useful enough to keep the peace. You spend years trying to earn approval that never comes, or hiding your true self to avoid conflict. The family doesn't value who you are, they value how well you maintain the illusion, and by the time you realize that, your identity feels like a mask you can't take off. Even after you leave that environment, the roles follow you. The golden child becomes an overachiever, terrified of failure. The scapegoat becomes hyper-independent, convinced they can trust no one. The invisible one becomes a people pleaser, mistaking invisibility for safety. These patterns repeat in your relationships, at work, even in the way you talk to yourself. You might not even realize you're still playing a part, still trying to keep someone else comfortable at your own expense. But roles are not identities. They were never the truth of who you are. They were coping mechanisms, survival strategies for a world that demanded you abandon your authenticity. Healing means recognizing the difference between who you were forced to be and who you really are. It means giving yourself permission to stop performing, to be messy, flawed, and real without fear of punishment. When you start peeling back those roles, it can feel terrifying. You'll wonder who you are without them. But underneath the layers of conditioning is someone who's always been there, someone kind, resilient, and capable of love that isn't tied to fear. That's the real you, waiting to be seen, not for what you can do or how well you play your part, but simply for existing. Empathy is often misunderstood as weakness, but in truth, it's one of the most powerful qualities a human being can possess. When you grow up in a narcissistic family, your empathy becomes both your survival tool and your greatest burden. You learn to read emotions like a language, noticing every shift in tone, every change in facial expression, every unspoken tension in the room. You learn to anticipate moods before they erupt, to soothe anger before it burns, and to offer comfort before anyone even asks. You develop a sixth sense for emotional danger because that's how you kept yourself safe. But what begins as survival soon becomes identity. You start to believe that your worth lies in how well you can care for others. You feel responsible for everyone's feelings, their sadness, their anger, their disappointment. You absorb their emotions as if they were your own, and while that makes you incredibly compassionate, it also leaves you emotionally exhausted. You learn to fix, to please, to heal everyone else, but you forget to take care of yourself. In narcissistic families, this pattern is not accidental, it's cultivated. Narcissistic parents feed off empathy. They exploit your kindness because it keeps them in control. They know that you'll forgive, that you'll understand, that you'll keep giving, even when they've taken too much. You start to confuse empathy with obligation, believing that love means enduring pain and that compassion means staying even when it hurts. Over time, empathy turns into self-erasure. You become so attuned to others that you lose connection to your own emotions. You may even feel guilty for setting boundaries or saying no because somewhere deep inside you were taught that protecting yourself is selfish. The world becomes an endless cycle of caretaking, and your own needs stay buried beneath everyone else's. But empathy is not the knee problem. It's the misuse of it. The same sensitivity that made you vulnerable in a narcissistic home is the same gift that once healed allows you to create genuine connection. Healing means learning to direct that empathy inward. It means asking yourself, what do I feel? What do I need? And allowing those answers to matter. It means realizing that compassion without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. When you begin to use empathy for yourself, everything changes. You start to see your own pain with gentleness, not shame. You forgive yourself for the ways you had to survive. You stop rescuing people who don't want to be saved, and you start rescuing the one person who always needed your love the most. You. Your empathy is your superpower, but it was never meant to be a weapon against yourself. When balanced with boundaries, it becomes your greatest strength. It allows you to love deeply without losing yourself, to feel others' pain without drowning in it, and to walk through the world with compassion that heals rather than depletes. Healing is reclaiming your voice, the one that was silenced, doubted, and dismissed for so many years. When you grow up in a narcissistic family, you learn that speaking your truth comes with consequences. You're told you're wrong, ungrateful, dramatic, or too emotional. You begin to shrink your words, then your thoughts, until one day you barely recognize your own opinions. You become fluent in silence, constantly translating what you want to say into what's safe to say. And that silence seeps into your bones. It becomes part of who you think you are. But the truth is, your quiet wasn't your nature. It was your armor. Reclaiming your voice begins the moment you realize that your story matters, even if no one from your past ever believed it. You start to speak not to convince, but to heal. You begin to tell your truth, softly at first, maybe even shakily, but each word becomes a brick in the foundation of your freedom. You stop asking for permission to express yourself. You stop explaining your pain to people who benefit from your silence. Instead, you start speaking for the one person who was never heard, the child version of you who was taught to stay quiet to survive. Finding your voice isn't about being loud or confrontational, it's about being real. It's about choosing authenticity over approval, even when it's uncomfortable. When you reclaim your voice, you begin to untangle the lies you were told, that your feelings were wrong, your memories unreliable, your needs too much. You learn to trust your own perception again, to say, "This happened, it hurt, and it matters." That simple act of acknowledgement becomes an act of revolution against years of gaslighting and emotional suppression. Healing doesn't mean shouting your story to everyone. Sometimes it means whispering it to yourself in a quiet room and finally believing it. Sometimes it means writing it down, sharing it with a friend, or speaking it in therapy. Each time you give your truth a voice, you reclaim power that was stolen from you. Because narcissistic environments thrive on silence, they need you to doubt yourself so the cycle can continue. But when you begin to speak, even softly, you break that pattern. You remind yourself that you have the right to exist as you are, to feel what you feel, and to say what needs to be said. And as your voice grows stronger, so does your peace. You start setting boundaries without apology. You stop needing validation from the people who once silenced you. You learn that your truth doesn't require anyone's approval. It just requires your courage. Speaking your truth isn't revenge, it's reclamation. It's choosing to live in alignment with yourself, not in reaction to your past. Because healing is not about changing who you are. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to be quiet, and daring to speak that truth out loud again and again until it feels like home.